welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Welcome to another episode of Up Close with Carlos Sang. My next guest is an acclaimed actor and writer whose new play, Breeding, is about to open at the King's Head Pub Theatre in Islington. He previously also wrote Verspertillio, which ran as part of the King's Head Theatre Plays on Film in 2021. It is a huge delight to be able to welcome Barry McStay to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Acclaimed. I don't think I've ever been called acclaimed before.
Verspertillio previously ran as part of the King's Head Theatre Senior Plays on Film in 2021. How does it feel to be, heading back there, with a live production of Breeding?
Yeah, it was, early 2021 when the King's Head did those plays on films was a pretty dark time for theatre in general. And I'd been through some medical stuff around the same time as well. So it was nearly the first time I had ventured into central London from my flat for the guts of 10 months. The Verspertillio ran at Vault Festival in 2019 originally, and it was a little two-hander, hour-long piece about two men and bats and love. And then when the King said, just out of the blue, just went, we want to do 4 or 5 plays on films. Would you like Verspertillio to be one of them? And it was so lovely to go back to a piece that had meant a lot to me and a lot of people, and we had the whole team come back together, and it felt like a little island of normality in the middle of all the madness of COVID. But obviously it was a couple of days filming, and it was very distant and empty. We're filming it, but you're very aware of the empty seats at the time. We were in this space and we made it look lovely, but the thing that's missing is an audience, which is where theatre thrives. So to be going back as part of Tom Ratcliffe's guest artistic director season it's so exciting, and I feel so very lucky. Tom's a friend of mine for a couple of years, and when he told me he was going to be doing this and asked if I wanted to be involved or wanted the piece to run there, it was one of those lovely things when someone takes a chance on you and wants to platform you as an artist. And certainly the reaction online in advance of the show seems to be quite positive. So we're less than a week away from the first preview, and it's that kind of eye of the storm moment where you're hoping it's all coming together, and it feels like it's coming together, but we really won't know until we're in front of an audience. But the King's Head has such a dedicated core group of supporters, and I hope and feel in my waters it's going to be a positive experience.
Yeah, I love the King's Head Theatre. It's such a lovely venue. It's got a great reputation for telling diverse stories and being an advocate for LGBTQ plus stories as well. Why do you think the King's Head has been able to maintain such a great reputation in the industry?
It's one of those sort of little theatres that could, isn't it? And I mean, I'm not going to go on about Arts Council stuff at the moment, but it seems like a decreasing number of those at the moment, and particularly venues that platform new writing. But yeah, the King's Head's been around for over 50 years now at this point, and I was looking at their website the other day, and Hugh Grant's first stage credit was there, and Joanna Lumley has worked there, and Stephen Burkhoff and Maureen Lipman and Stuart Parker and Victoria Wood. Lots of amazing people performed there. But I think it's found a place in the theatre landscape in London, which like you said, it tries to platform diverse stories and queer stories in particular, and that's kind of been its focus for the last decade or so, especially, and increasingly diverse stories within that. All the colours of the rainbow flag, so to speak, which is great. And particularly since the closure of Above the Stag in the last year as well, there's fewer dedicated queer spaces where, as a member of the gay community, we're aware of the decreasing number of gay bars and queer spaces, and it's similar in the theatre landscape. So it's important to hold on to those places like the King's Head that do tell stories that mightn't be told elsewhere, or that get less airtime elsewhere. And particularly one of the reasons I wanted to write Breeding, which is about a gay couple and their social workers, they navigate adoption, is that so often domestic dramas and stories about parenthood are the preserve of heterosexual couples in drama and on stage. That's not to say there haven't been. I'm not saying I'm the first person to think of having gays with kids, but it's an area that by and large people expect that it to be a a heterosexual tale. And so
Mm.
taking something that has been theirs for so long and making it ours felt like a really like an exciting thing to do, and certainly. And then the play obviously goes to lots of other places as well. But as a jumping in point and a jumping off point, it's the sort of the King's Head provides the space for stories that I haven't seen elsewhere, and we don't always get the chance to see elsewhere.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you really rarely see, a gay couple, on stage or on screen, get to that stage where they're, thinking about
Mm.
adopting kids. Why do you think, we don't, often see these kind of stories, with gay relationships in particular?
Well, we've talked a little bit about this during in rehearsals, and the couple at the center of the play are Zeb and Owen. And they sort of embody a couple of different ideals in parts. That Owen wants to be that new normal, or be even further than the new normal, be able to take the rights that we've been won, and use that have been won by the LGBTQ plus community in the last decade, and use them, get married, have kids, all of those things. Whereas Zeb is a little bit more cautious in that, is that, as a queer man, is that something that I want? Is that something I should do? Is that something I need to do? And I think, there's a wider thing at play here where for the longest time, it's only the last, it's astonishingly recent that queer people have been allowed to live openly. And I mean, still not, it's still not a safe space. And that varies from, across the world, even in the UK, where we think we'd be, fairly advanced. It's still very recent that we've sort of come to a place where the idea of two men getting married, or two women having a baby, or all of these things have become normalized. And so it takes a while for people to catch up with that. And
Mm.
whether it's day-to-day assumptions about, saying, like, seeing a dad with a pram out and going, oh, where's mum, or the idea of going to see a show and expecting it to be, if it's about kids, expecting it to be a straight couple. So yeah, I think it's just that case of catching up with ourselves. We've
Mm.
got these advances, and art is a great space in which to reflect those, and hopefully to challenge people's expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, you're also playing Owen in the play yourself. Was this because you related to him more than Zeb, or were you just more attracted to the part?
It's the first time I've done this. The first time I've been in something that I've written, and I mean, this is the fourth full length production of something of mine. And that's another thing I'm very grateful to the King's Head for. It's the first like 3 week run of something of mine as well. Previously, I've had sort of week long runs at festivals. Owen is Irish, so that helps. But Matthew, who's the director, Matthew Iliff, he asked me, in the run up to it, was it in any way autobiographical? And it's not, genuinely. I don't have any kids, and I've not given the deep consideration to it that Owen and Zeb do in the show. But at some point, I wanted to be. At some point in my career, I wanted to be able to be a writer actor, and I think I sort of felt that I'd sort of done my time being outside of the pieces I'd written. There were conceivably pieces, certainly in two of the three of my three previous shows, that I could have conceivably played, and I consciously didn't want to even broach that, because I think I learned so much being on the outside of those. I trained as an actor initially, and then began writing, and I'm still learning. Certainly throughout this process, there are so many things where, but I feel like I could have done better as a writer, and I'm learning throughout this as well. But I definitely wanted to be able to feel like I had a solid idea of how I write and how I work, and how that side of my brain works, before trying to put myself in a piece. But like I say, we had 2 pretty awful years with COVID and everything, and if I wasn't going to play, a gay Irish guy in London with a slightly neurotic side, then I don't know what role I would play.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting as well, like hearing you say that. How has it been also, working with Dan Nicholson on this too? Has it been challenging developing that chemistry that, Zeb and Owen have in the play?
No, God, you'd read any research. I'm very impressed. Yeah, no, oddly, so Dan Nicholson, who's playing Zeb, my onstage husband, first of all, he's a dream, and he's wonderful. Both he and Amira, who's playing Beth, they're just, absolutely brilliant actors, wonderful people. We have such a lovely cast chemistry. And then the onstage chemistry, funny, Dan came in and auditioned, and he reminded me within like 10 seconds of having come in the door that we had met each other 15 years beforehand, because he went to the same university as I did. He was 3 years behind me, so I didn't really know him. And he remembered me, and I shamefully had to admit I didn't remember him. But I later jogged my own memory. But it was such a weird little glitch in time to suddenly go from like having met someone a lifetime ago,
Mm.
to him walking in the room and, being immediately brilliant as Zeb. And then, we got to go through the process of offering roles out, and thankfully he and Amira said yes. And that sort of weirdly made the connection straight away. And we found a very easy sort of sense of each other on stage. We found a very easy physicality with each other. We did some intimacy work with Jess Tucker Boyd yesterday, which was the first time I'd worked with an intimacy director, and it was so exciting and so wonderful to work with somebody who made you feel very safe and made it feel like a collaboration. And I think that's what the chemistry is, really. It's not some magical thing. It's
Mm.
collaborating with each other and hearing each other and bouncing off each other, and acknowledging and seeing each other. And so yeah, that's definitely, I'm hopeful that comes across when we present it in front of an audience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're acting and you've written the show as well. But you're not directing the show. You've handed it over to Matthew Iliff. How has it been,
Yeah.
handing your piece of work over and letting someone else's vision take over?
Oh, it's an absolute relief, Carlos. I'm not going to lie. I would be a terrible director, and I'm very aware of that. And even that, people will say to you, "Oh, you should just make your own work. Just make your own work." And the things I can do are I can write and I can act, and I'm not a producer. I'm not a director. I'm none of those other things. Um, and certainly my work is made so much better by the people I collaborate with, whether it was Lucy Jane Atkinson on Verspertillio, or Emily Jenkins on the first, or Matthew on this, and obviously the team of the designers who work on all of those and help. You know, it's just some black ink on a page to begin with,
Mm.
and a story, and people bring that off the page and put it in front of you in 3D and make you. Certainly, with Matthew is very good at making sure I don't steer into my sentimental side too far, and challenging me and pushing me to think more deeply about the work I've made, inspiring me in all of the right ways. And he's not. I said to him at the start of this. He said, "Are you going to be able to balance the two roles together?" And I said, "I won't know until I do it, but I don't want you to go easy on me." And he hasn't, and I think that's to the benefit of the play. And he just won an Offie last month, I think, for Bacon at the
Mm.
Finborough. So he's brilliant and ridiculously young and good, and young looking and all of those things, which is awful. But yeah, I feel very lucky, and he's helped craft this into something which I hope was going to be really impactful. Yeah, surround yourself with good people is the trick to make yourself seem better than you might be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you sometimes hear that, gay relationships are harder to make work because, there's too much, testosterone, there's too much competition and lusts and insecurity in a relationship. Do you think this is true at all?
God. Well, I say as a man who's been married for 7.5 years to another man, so far so good. Yeah, I mean, every relationship's different, and there are different stresses and pressures that come with whatever makeup your relationship is. I don't necessarily, some people say, oh, all couples always fight, or there's always like tensions in relationship, and I don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that you should have arguments all the time. But obviously, that doesn't necessarily make great drama. So certainly in the play, there are tensions, and all three characters have their wants and goals and dreams, and they pursue them in various different, sometimes flawed ways. And I mean, but at the heart of it, there is still, love is still at the core of it, and that's the anchoring factor. If these are just horrible people, or if they were just people who were being shit to each other all the time, then can I swear? I'm so sorry. If they were just people who were being awful to each other all the time, then the audience won't connect with it. Whereas I hope that the audience will understand, even if they don't always approve of the things that happen in the show.
I mean, you've been very open about your sexuality as well, and the gay experience very much exists as a theme throughout your work. Why has it been so important to you to be so open about this aspect of your life?
Oh, Carlos, this is like being in a psychiatrist's couch now. Um, there's a lot of parts of my, identity. I'm gay. I'm Irish, living in London. I was raised Catholic. I went to a boarding school. There's lots of things that that would have restricted who I was growing up, and thankfully, much less so than a lot of other people have experienced. But they do have those little spikes sort of stick into your personality, and they help sort of shape and maybe deform you in certain ways. And so when you get the chance to pull them out and heal yourself a little bit, then that's you got to take those. And it's nice to be able to be at a point in my life where I feel that I am happier than I was last year, and I would have been happier than I was the year before, and that 20 year ago me would have been amazed to see where I'd gotten to now. And I think that's a lot of people's experiences, whether it be in coming out or in, falling in love with someone of the same sex, or getting married, or building a family in whatever queer way you want to, or presenting queer work that speaks to you and the community that you've become part of. I got a lovely message from somebody a few months ago who was running auditions for something, and they said that a young Irish guy had come in and performed a monologue from my first play, which was called Our Island, which was on in Dublin in 2015, and it was about a gay couple living in London and the Irish guy's parents coming over to spend Christmas with them, and family tensions and stuff. And he came into this monologue, and they asked him afterwards why he'd chosen it. And he said it was, when he saw it in Dublin, he said it was the first time he'd felt that he'd seen a play that like represented him and spoke to him. And that's not to toot my own horn, but that's so been the experience for me with lots of other people's work. And so the opportunity to share stories that have that impact on other people is such a privilege, and such a precious thing that you've got to treat with respect and with care. And we live in a time of increased tensions towards LGBTQ plus people, particularly the trans community, and so telling our stories and saying to members outside the community, we're here and we have our own lives and we have our own validity, and saying to people within the community that you're not alone. All of those things are really important.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a lot more, LGBTQ plus stories, in theatre nowadays. You have effing men coming back to Waterloo East. A Little
Yes.
Life is currently running in the West End. There's a full queer interrogation season happening at the King's Head, as you mentioned. Why do you think theatre seems to be, so receptive to telling, queer stories, compared to other mediums, perhaps?
Because we're interested in people, I think. And we again, this came up in rehearsals. We say, the way to be interesting is to be interested, and is to be interested in other people. And theatre makers are naturally curious about the world and how it works, and why people are the way they are. And I think that's why generally, people who are involved in the arts and people who have exposure to the arts have, more empathy and a better ability of critical thinking and understanding of other people. And so when you have a space like that, which is, going to take you as you are, if you like, and try and understand you, then naturally gay people and queer people are going to gravitate towards that as a safer space. And if you like, mainstream media, film and television has been a bit slower in taking up those stories, but whereas there is a bit more of a kind of do it yourself thing to making theatre. So it's an area where queer people have been able to go, I'm going to tell my story, and this is a place for me to be able to do it. And the act of bringing people together in a room and sharing stories is such a fulfilling and nourishing, almost religious thing, that it can sort of it enriches and emboldens us to do more and more and more. And yeah, like you said, the King's Head is one of the places that has tried to do that. And certainly Tom's season, the Queer Interrogation, he's just absolutely gunned for getting as much queer new writing and giving it a platform. And that's so important, that we give people a leg up. He's a brilliant writer and actor, and someone I admire greatly. And the fact that he, in being given his platform, went, I think you're good, and I think this piece you've written is good, and I want to help you, and all of these other, however many other writers and theatre makers he's supporting as well. That we've always got to look out for each other in the queer community. But yeah, like I said, I think theatre is such a living space, and a generally a safe space, and an accepting space, that it sort of seems the natural home for queer art to start and flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we often hear, the theatre being, a backbone to British culture, but it is also strangely very underappreciated as well. How would you describe the theatre scene as well back home in Ireland? How does it compare to, the British theatre scene?
Oh God, well, I've not been really home very much for the last few years. Yeah, we did. Our Island happened in 2015 at the Dublin Fringe Festival, and then we took Verspertillio over there after Vault Festival in 2019. But I do feel I'm a little bit disconnected from it, but I do get like envy from abroad every time I see friends or people I know doing amazing projects. And it's definitely formed a lot of my sensitivities. I'm big fan of the likes of Conor McPherson. I think for me, the story is always the thing that sparks whatever it is I'm writing. I very rarely sit down to write a concept play. It'll usually be, Verspertillio was based on an article I read in The Guardian about the last bat of its kind hibernating in a tunnel in Chichester. And similarly, a friend of mine, reading came from a friend of mine who had adopted, telling me a story about he and his husband being separated into separate rooms and being asked about their sex lives by their social worker, which just immediately struck me as quite funny, but also a little bit dark. And then like immediately, and it struck me as quite theatrical, and you can sort of see how that would look on stage. You can imagine how that plays out as a kind of a quite a dark and sexy Mr. and Mr. game. And then sort of the play sort of grew out from that. So certainly I think the Irish the Irish tradition of storytelling certainly has definitely informed my work. But I'm sort of in a privileged position in a way where I'm an Irish person who's moved away, and it does create an interesting sort of dual sensitivity. And I'm very influenced by writers and theatre makers over here as well, which is great to be constantly exposed to new ways of writing, new ways of thinking, and new forms of theatre. It sort of it feeds you and helps you grow. But I would love to get back and do more work at home, and maybe breeding will get back home. And I've got some more ideas for more Irish centric work as well. But yeah, the dream is to be always be able to do stuff back home.
Yeah, would you consider yourself to be more of an actor who writes or a writer who acts?
Definitely the former. I would rather play Hamlet than write Hamlet, which is probably monetarily not the correct decision. But the lovely thing about doing this is getting to get up in a rehearsal room and work with people and have a fourth wall. I've done so much immersive stuff in the last couple of years that it's really nice to be doing a play. But that being said, I feel very lucky and blessed to be, apparently able to write a bit, and to have had parents who supported me in that, and teachers who helped encourage my creative writing, and everyone along the way who gives you a little bit of encouragement. Be it that I sent my first play, which was a complete mess, to the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, and the literary manager there invited me to come in and have a chat and said, "We're not going to do your play, but I wanted to talk to you about how we operate, and what sort of work would be interested in, and how you can keep connections with us." Or Lucy Atkinson messaging me on Twitter, having seen a short play of mine and going, "We should work together," and that led to Verspertillio. People taking a chance on me as a writer has certainly, I think, made me a better actor as well. But I still sort of balance the two, and there'll be some projects I would write and won't be in. There'll be some that I hopefully will write and be in. There'll be some things I'm acting in and I'm not involved in the writing side of it. And it's what a joy to be able to do all of those things. I'm very lucky. Some people don't get to do any of them. Some people have to work in offices all day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your career has taken you into so many different directions, with acting, writing, podcasting as well, with Burst Foot Forward.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, how do you manage to balance everything? And, how would you measure success as well?
Oh God. Success is always a very movable thing for us in the industry, and we're always certainly I've been guilty of this, and I know a lot of people will be, of you're doing one thing but you're going, oh, what's going to happen next, what happens when this finishes, or if this goes well, will that mean this thing happens? And the thing to do is always to try and realize you're in the middle of it, and to enjoy the being in the middle of it bit, rather than be looking ahead or looking behind. I've worked on jobs in the past which have been hard work, and you'd be sitting in a dressing room or a green room, people be sort of moaning about how hard it is. And you're like, but we're doing the thing. We're doing the thing we want to do and we've trained to do. We've auditioned to do and been told no so many times. And when we get to finally do it, that's the success. And there are lots of things that I hope might happen in my career, in my acting career, my writing career, my podcasting career. Down the line, if they happen, maybe that'll be a measure of success. But I am trying to make the act of doing that stuff the success, because I think that's where you get joy, and that's where you you can thrive mentally, and that helps you. I think that makes you work better as well if you're just in the moment of it. Yeah, and balancing it, I don't know if I ever do. I have had nights after we get home from this where I'll be working till 1 a.m. either doing rewrites or trying to learn lines or getting beats of the play into my head. So hopefully a nice long weekend with my husband after it's all done. That'll be how I balance it out.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you say that as well. Yeah, we your last play, Verspertillio, obviously did very well with audiences and critics alike. What do you see as being in the future of some of your past plays as well?
Uh, Thank you. Yeah, I really did love that play, and I was very a lot of nice things happened for it. It was the first play of mine that was published. Very much helped me make a lot of connections, and established me in the minds of some people as a writer here as well. Something might happen with that again. Maybe. I've got a short film of mine that I've written that I'm hopefully might be doing in May, which would be the first sort of first screen thing of mine, outside of lockdown that would have happened. And I've got other big scripts that I need to go back and do some work on once I've got the headspace, once this is up and running, and try and get them into a shape to send to people. So I mean, it's funny. We'll go as artists, you go through periods where you just want to do nothing and you want to relax, and then you get the little voice at the back of your head going, "We should be doing something now. You should be writing really now." And actually, the one good thing about doing breeding, one of many good things, but one of the good things about doing breeding is that it's helped get my brain back, fit and alive to the writing process, which I haven't had to necessarily do for sort of big scripts. I've written some shorts over the last few years, but actually a big play, I've not had to be in that headspace since 2020. So it'll be hopefully this is a springboard to other things. But like I say, Carlos, I'm focusing on the now.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you've been a huge, champion for new writers for queer stories over your career. Would you ever consider doing something more commercial, which is very different to what you've been doing recently?
The jackpot in our industry is finding a producer who'll take a chance on you. So I'm very, very blessed with Gabby Sills, who has taken on breeding, and there's a lot. I know other people, producers who work in the commercial sector, and whatever the story is that I've got to tell, the first thing you want to do is find the person who cares about it as much as you do and wants to tell it. And then you can think about where the places that might go. And there are things that I've written or things that I'd like to write that could work more in a commercial setting. But some things start off in the subsidized sector or in fringe theater and end up becoming big commercial. I mean, I just saw Operation Mincemeat a couple of weeks ago, again for the third time, which I absolutely adore. And shows like it and For Black Boys are even like past work from the King's Head, like La Boheme. Shows like that just show you that if you make the work that you love and it finds an audience, the possibilities are there. And the first thing is the story and making the work and making it as good as possible. And then, where it goes, that's hopefully, there's a bit of luck and there's a bit of planning and there's a bit of what do audiences want to see involved in all of that. But yeah, I would never say no to anyone wanting to pay me a lot of money and commission me to write something. But yeah, so long as it's something I want to write.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, coming back to breeding, when you were writing it, did you have a specific audience in mind, or did it start off, being really a play that you were writing for yourself?
It's all, I think, always by and large, it's always got to be something that, for me anyway, I've always got to be interested in the thing I'm writing. So I am the audience member to begin with, but then obviously when you're sending stuff out or you're applying for things, you're pitching to people, you've got to be able to say who are the people you wanted to speak to. And obviously the queer community are people I'd love to see this. I think I've got a reasonably good ear for dialogues of people who like sharp contemporary writing, audiences who appreciate, diverse stories or who are interested in sort of stories that talk about now. The idea of wanting to be a parent is such an age-old thing, but this is it being told in a very 21st century way. I don't always set out to think about, who's this play for beyond, am I interested in this and then you sort of, if you're interested in something, there's something very sexy in if you meet somebody who's very interested and passionate in something, even if it's something that you would never have necessarily been interested in before. That can be a very like attractive thing. And I like to think that applies to writing as well. Again, to go back to Operation Mincemeat, it's about a very obscure mission from the Second World War, but it's been told in such a witty and inventive and excited manner that you can't help but get gripped by it. And I think all of the best stories, be they, big, grand geopolitical dramas like James Graham's work, or sort of very small and perfectly formed little plays like I love Tati Hennessy and Vinay Patel and people like that. If you're interested in it and you're a big fan of it and you want to be in the front row of the audience watching your own play, then hopefully other people will be as well.
Yeah. Do you think marriage has changed the way that you approach work as well, or do you think you're still the same
Ooh.
person?
Oh, I don't know. Funny, I don't really let my husband read any of my stuff. He has to come and see it before he gets to know anything about it most of the time. He did movement direct the first, so he had to read it then. He had to read something of that, but he hasn't. I sort of every time I'm sitting on the sofa, I'm learning anything or working on something, I sort of have to like turn my shoulder so he can't see over it. I think, if you're happy and you feel secure and supported in your personal life, then it makes the slog easier. Hopefully it makes the slog easier. The days when you come home and you're like, oh, I just feel I was terrible today, or I didn't think I was acting very well, or I just hit a wall with the writing, or you've had a bad audition, you've had a rejection. Having a support, and funny, this ties into the whole adoption thing. One of the questions you get in the adoption workbooks that we've looked at are, who are your support network? How would you support a child? Who are the people who support you when you have a child? I'm not saying in this metaphor that the play is my child and my husband is my wider support network, but I'm not saying it. But yeah, I think certainly marriage has made me happier and more secure in who I am, and then that has allowed me to be hopefully braver and bolder with how I live my life and how I make my art as well.
Yeah, it's been so interesting listening to you. Yeah, just as the last question, how would you finish this sentence? Barry McStay is.
I've listened to some of your podcasts, Carlos, and you always ask a question like this at the end. And I was on my way in here going, what if he asks what's the best thing about being Barry McStay? Because I've heard you ask David Ames that. Barry McStay is very lucky to have had the support he's had growing up. Is very lucky to be blessed with an imagination and a playful sense of humor. He's very lucky to have found a community in theatre and in my personal life. And Barry McStay is hoping that a bunch of you will buy tickets to come see Breeding at the King's Head from the 19th of April to the 7th of May.